Hi, this is Dominic Keating. I played Lieutenant Malcolm Reed on Enterprise, as you probably know, and you are listening to the NX 7062 podcast. Enjoy.
Yes, you are listening and seeing the NX 7062 podcast. I wonder if I can get him to update that. I don't know. I'm one of those people. I will always ask the question. So maybe if Vegas happens, I will be asking him to say watching instead, since I've moved to this wonderful realm of video. So yes, I've got my little commentator with me tonight in case you can't hear her. That's Sugar. She's wandering around on the floor. Thank you all so much for joining me as usual. It is the NX 7062 podcast, as promised, in the middle of a snowstorm. I figured even if my power went out, at least I have my laptop. It wouldn't have looked this good, because I wouldn't have been able to put that much effort in with the laptop. But you would have seen me one way or the other. I was going to be here. Because tonight is a safe space to talk about Star Wars versus Star Trek. But first, wanted to let everybody know, in case you haven't heard, GalaxyCon, one of the major convention companies out there that switched over to virtual, has been doing a really fantastic job when it comes to offering some very fun Star Trek experiences. Hey, Travis. In fact, Travis, I'm glad you're here. I don't know. I think I reposted this. In fact, I think you saw it on Twitter. Nicole DeBoer was posting that on, I almost said January, but you know what? It's February 1st. On Saturday, February 27th at 4 p.m. Eastern, some Deep Space Nining is going to be going on over at GalaxyCon. I love the way they have this set up because it's going to be a live, free Q&A with Nana Visitor and Nicole DeBoer and Alexander Siddig and Terry Farrell and Armin Shimmerman and Andrew Robinson. So they're all going to be there for a live Q&A, and that's free. And then if you want a little one-on-one time with your favorite DS9 alum, then that's a pay experience. But then there's also personalized autographs, which are also a paid experience. But you know what? Where else are you going to have a chance if you've never been to a convention for some reason? Maybe distance was a factor. Maybe finances were a factor. This is a great way for you to get that convention experience. The free Q&A. I've done those. You really got to get your questions in really quick and then just hope that they get seen. Maybe ask them more than once because a lot of times they get lost in the chatter. And since you've got until the 27th, my suggestion, as always, is come up with something unique. Maybe something that they've never been asked before. That's always a really good way to get your questions noticed. Or save it and switch over to, treat yourself to a live one-on-one and then get your questions answered directly with the with a specific star that hasn't been on my show. Although every time Nicole's been on, we've had technical issues. So third time's a charm. I'm thinking about asking her again. Maybe we'll try that Halloween thing again, and maybe she'll be stateside and won't be using her iPhone, because it turns out that the platform I use, StreamYard, does not like iPhones or iPads. It prefers, I guess, solid computers. And the other thing about these is wireless connections don't always work. Remember that whole thing with wired, like an actual wire that runs between your computer and your modem? StreamYard seems to like that the best. So that's another reason why coming to you from a laptop wouldn't have been the best. But anyway, I am here. So far, so good. And you know what? New Jersey hasn't even been hit that badly yet. I can still see my car tires, which means there's barely an inch of snow on the ground. So, but you know what? Wake up tomorrow morning and we will see where that goes. Also, in case you weren't here last week or missed it, and I actually hadn't set that up yet, but I am on Patreon, and I have my first patron, Domestic has become a patron, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. If you head over to Patreon and check it out, you can support little old me doing my little old show. You know what? It helps with computer upgrades. It helps with the cost of getting to and from Vegas. Little things like that. I know times are tough, so I get it. But you can become a patron for as low as $5. Almost all the tiers come with little gifts. Which is awesome. Patreon set it up. So it's little merchandisey gifts that I set up for you guys, depending on what tier you are. But all of the tiers get you into my private Facebook chat. I set up a private Facebook group. And if you become a patron, you will get an invitation. And then when you join, that's going to give you access to me directly, a little more directly than my regular page. And I'm going to that's where I'm going to let you guys actually suggest guests, suggest topics, things that you guys want to see me talk about. So anyway, I would love your support. Head over to Patreon. If you can't do financial support, you know what? I get it. We are all struggling. We are still in the middle of a pandemic. But I would love it if you would subscribe, because subscribing to my lovely little YouTube channel, just show me that love. You know what? I just appreciate it. I appreciate the love that you guys are showing for me. So again, Domestic, thank you so much for becoming the first patron. I really appreciate that. But hopefully that will lead to a couple more. Tell your friends. We can all come and hang out. Like I said, it gives you access. You can actually, I'm going to actually start letting the patrons suggest topics. Like tonight's topic, again, safe space, no judgment. And in case you haven't noticed, I'm doing my Baby Yoda, because, you know, Baby Yoda, regardless of whether you are Star Trek, Star Wars, or neither, I think everybody knows who Baby Yoda is. And I think you can't, if nothing, you cannot hate the Baby Yoda. Regardless of your fandoms, you can't hate the Baby Yoda, or Grogu, as he is now known. God knows what they're going to do with the Mandalorian in the 3rd season. Baby Yoda's got to come back at least once. Well, hello. There we go. Hello, Patrick. Thank you so much for joining us. I don't know, juvenile. Well, I guess you could call it juvenile, but again, this is a safe space, so we're gonna not get insulting. We're gonna not judge who likes what. I mean, if you don't like one or the other, then respect. I've always liked them both, and I've said this on the show before that Star Wars came into my life obviously in 1977. Yes, I'm dating myself. Star Trek, I can't actually pinpoint when Star Trek was part of my life, because the reruns obviously were on TV before 1977. So it's very possible Star Trek was there first. Exactly. You have to love them differently. They are two completely different things. Star Trek, I think, and ironically, I'm going to use the word that kind of got the cage booted from NBC. Star Trek tends to be a little more cerebral. Right from the get in '66, Roddenberry was tackling the social issues of the day. Lucas, not so much. He wasn't one to go out, that wasn't the point. The point was kind of to make a space Western, per se. The point was, just that classic tale of good versus evil. It was a morality play. It was, it was about, and the one thing I liked about Empire Strikes Back, and things that this is something that we've seen in Star Trek as well, but good doesn't always win. And I mean, you had an entire movie, Empire Strikes Back, where you are sitting there waiting for something to happen. They can't possibly put Han in the carbonite because somebody's going to come sweeping in. Nope, Han goes in the carbonite. Well, Luke's going to defeat Darth Vader, right? I mean, I know it's, he's the underdog, but doesn't the underdog always pull out in the end? Nope, he gets his hand cut off and Darth Vader wins. I mean, so I love that Empire Strikes Back went somewhere where I think a lot of people weren't expecting it, because even the Star Trek movies, I mean, you sit down, all the Star Trek movies had that kind of closure. Good always, on one level or another, good always wins. Yeah, Spock died, but he died saving the ship. And the same thing, Decker sacrificed himself to save the ship in the first movie, which, by the way, was so boring. But you know what? That Star Trek the motion picture predated Star Wars. Maybe without that, Star Wars wouldn't have gotten the reception that it got, because Star Trek opened that door for amazing space tales. I mean, listen, oh, by the way, Buck Rogers is getting a reboot. Total sidebar, but I literally just read that article, and George Clooney just signed on to the project. Still a huge Gil Gerard fan. I absolutely love those old the classic TV. You can't call it a classic TV. Well, it's a classic TV show, but Buck Rogers has been around way before Gil Gerard got frozen. But Buck Rogers is coming back. That's the other thing. That's another parallel that you can draw, I think, between Star Wars and Star Trek is there's a lot of, I don't want to say hate, not the right word, but there's a lot of disappointment with a lot of the modern tellings of the stories. I mean, the classic trilogy, the Star Wars classic trilogy will always be my trilogy. Hand shot first. Done. Hand shot first. I had a lot of issues with the prequels. I had issues with the sequels that I never had with the original trilogy. And the same can be said for the reboots of Star Trek. There are a lot of people that have a problem with the 2009s. I happen to like the JJ verse. There's another parallel. Why was JJ doing both? I have always said, just jokingly, but when you cross fandoms like that, sometimes there's problems. Bryan Singer, who I think did an amazing job with the X-Men. I really love the X-Men. I thought the X-Men were great. Hey, domestic. Yes, Aaron Gray and Pamela Hemsley. I actually found out after the fact, I'm switching topics here because you brought up Aaron. She was actually on Star Trek The Cruise 3. She has a company called Heroes for Hire. She actually does bookings, and she has Star Trek clients, and she does bookings. And I know somebody that had lunch with her, and he's lucky I'm still speaking to him, because I'm like, what do you mean Aaron Gray was on the cruise and you had lunch with her? Rude. But I've told him I would love to meet Aaron Gray one of these days. I think she's fabulous. My sister would be so jealous because she was always a huge Buck Rogers fan. And Pamela Hemsley was great. Princess Ardala was awesome. One of my favorite villainesses. Oh, see, now I just lost my train of thought. Okay. Oh yeah. So, Bryan Singer, amazing job with the X-Men. He crosses over to the DC universe and we get Superman Returns, which I freaking hate. I cannot stand Superman Returns. And if I was still doing a show where I talked about more than just Star Trek, I would go on a rant about why I hate Superman Returns. You can't be in it. I'm sure other people have heard him say that. Well, yeah, you absolutely can be a fan of both. They're completely different. I'm a fan of Marvel and DC. Their stories are completely different. I have never understood why you have to pick and choose, and why they're very different. They are very different. Like I said, Star Trek is incredibly cerebral storytelling, and Star Wars tends to be much more adventure oriented, a little more on the escapism side. I don't watch The Mandalorian to become culturally aware. I don't expect to be taught anything when I sit down and watch The Mandalorian. I expect to watch Baby Yoda use the Force, and I expect to, watch Mando kick some ass. I mean, there was that, the character development is good. Obviously, you don't watch a story for, you don't keep watching a story if the story's not good. You don't keep watching a story if the acting sucks. That's a given. But again, there's escapism where you just watch it because it's just a good story and you can lose yourself in it. But a lot of times, if you're going to sit down and watch Star Trek, a lot of times there's a moral to the story. There's more cerebral going on. Sometimes it really makes you think about things that are going on in the world around you, which is amazing. And again, that's back to like what Sirach and I were talking about last week. It's good storytelling, but it's different storytelling. You have to be in the mood for one or the other. I mean, I just got a 4K Blu-ray player a couple weeks ago to go with my new 4K TV. First thing I did, looked up which Star Wars movies were on 4K, because the first thing I wanted to watch on 4K was Star Wars. I found Return of the Jedi, and then I had to go Return of the Jedi, Empire, Return of the Jedi. I picked Return of the Jedi because the Emperor is probably one of my favorite characters. years, and he's not in Empire Strikes Back. So, but that's what I wanted. I didn't want a Star Trek. I wanted Return of the Jedi. And then there are just sometimes where I want to sit down and I want to watch Star Trek. My mood dictates what I want to watch, how I'm feeling. I mean, there's a certain comfort in Star Wars for me because my best friend in the entire world, someone that I've known since I was in college. Actually, I was in high school. He was in college. We bonded over Star Wars, and so Star Wars has a very special place in my heart. And what's funny is I always used to say I like Star Wars better than Star Trek, but then I started going to the conventions and I started meeting all these Star Trek people, and I started making friends. And that's actually another difference between Star Wars and Star Trek. Star Wars there were conventions. I mean, you could catch Mark Hamill at a convention. They did conventions back when conventions were first starting and those movies were first hitting the screens. They were out and about. Star Trek, a friend of mine used the perfect word. Star Trek, in that way, is more accessible. Star Trek Las Vegas is, I don't want to say always going to be there because God knows what the future holds. But Star Trek is way more accessible just as a community than Star Wars is, where you can mix and mingle with the celebrities and the people that brought you your stories as well as these fans. That sense of community, that it's not specific to Star Trek because obviously there are conventions that do other things, but Star Trek specifically has its own community like that, its own convention family feel. I mean, I go to other conventions. I go to Wizard World Philly. It was one of my favorites. But it doesn't, and I enjoy it. And I go with a really good friend of mine and we go every year. Couldn't make it 2019, but we've gone every year before that. But, that's for me to hang out with my friends. My one friend specific. There's not the sense of community that a Star Trek specific convention will give you. Let's see. So it's okay to like something William doesn't. Cool. I'm going to binge watch Star Wars. Yeah, absolutely. My friend Raymond, who's popped in here every now and then, I haven't talked to him today, so I doubt he's even remembered that the show was on tonight. But his husband doesn't like either of them, and I like to tease him about that. I'm like, and you're still married? So you're allowed, which is kind of why it made me want to kind of do this show where we could just sit down and talk about, Star Wars v Star Trek. I think that it's ridiculous to say that you can't like both. But I will tell you this, and it's just something I figured out, and it's just something that I found really funny. It's just happened in my own life. And I remember this. My first STLV was 2017. And my mom, being the amazing person that she is, not only I was able to book a cheaper flight out of Newark than Philadelphia. I'm actually closer to Philly International. Philly International is a get up and go 20 minutes before you need to be at the airport. Newark is an hour and a half away from me, give or take. My mom had Marriott points. So my mom says to me, listen, you're flying out of Newark. Why don't we try and find you a Marriott that's got shuttle service? And instead of having to get up at the crack of dawn, you can just spend the night. Nobody has to drive, So my mom drives me to Marriott the night before. So I've got my messenger bag all decked out with all these buttons that I found. Well, one of them was an Imperial insignia, and I had this really cool old style Star Trek button. And I get out of the car and I get up to my room and the Star Trek button has fallen off. And I go out, I found it lying in the hallway. And I just realized that it seems like every time I try to mix my fandoms, either when I'm wearing clothes or when I'm doing buttons or anything like that, you can't mix fandoms. The first time it happened to me, it actually happened to me earlier. The convention you all know that I talk about, the New Jersey 2016 50th anniversary that got me back into Star Trek. I bought the second day. I bought one of those really cool 50th anniversary badges, and it's magnetic. So you think nothing's going to, a pin, you worry that it's going to stick you or you're not going to do it right, it's going to fall off. Like, it's magnetic. It's gonna, it's a magnet. One side, perfect. Wore it all day Saturday. Got it home, took the shirt all day, fine. The next day I was wearing it, but the next day I was wearing my a Sith tank top because at the time I didn't have any Star Trek. I actually didn't have any Star Trek t-shirts at the time because, like I said, this was my first Star Trek convention in God knows how long. So I put the badge on my Sith tank top. Didn't get halfway through the convention. I looked down, it's gone. No idea where it went. It was magnetic. So yeah. So the one thing I learned is you can love them both, but I do not recommend you mixing your fandoms in your wardrobe because something will ultimately jump off somewhere. Just saying. At least that's been my personal experience. Can't win. So I try not to put my Star Trek buttons and my Star Wars stuff together because I like them all. I actually did last year, bought a replacement 50th anniversary. I loved that badge. And somebody had them at STLV, so I rebought it. But see, so you guys are all here in the safe space. We all love both of them. Do you love, Faith has already said she loves them differently. Like I said, I used to say that I liked Wars better than Trek, but now I'm with Faith. It's a very different kind of love. It's like relationships. If you've had more than one relationship in your life where you've fallen in love with somebody, you never love one person the same as you love somebody else. It's absolutely a different love, and it's okay. So I'm more comfortable now not saying I love one more than the other. I love them differently. I don't know how you guys feel, if you love one or the other. Like I said, when I'm really, like I said, my Star Wars for me is a more of a, like I said, I've loved it since I saw it in the theaters originally. Like I said, I have a slightly more emotional tie to Star Wars because it means something to me and my bestie. He and I, we once tried to do the entire, we tried to quote Return of the Jedi entirely over the phone one night because he was bored. And he called me at 3 a.m. and we tried, didn't work, but we were going to see if we could do the entire movie. Let's see what's Domestic have to say from snooty actors that Star Wars. Well, yeah. That was definitely a different time. But see, that's the thing. They were good stories. It's just, but you're right. I think when you label something science fiction, people tend to get their noses bent out of shape if they don't understand that science fiction has amazing stories. Science fiction is just a method of storytelling. Well, because Star Trek, when Star Trek started, like I said, Star Trek always had that approach of tackling issues and storytelling, and the effects weren't, they didn't rely, they were the wagon train to the stars. They didn't, except for beaming and phasers, there was very little in the special effects. It was way more about storytelling. But when you had Star Wars and they were zipping all over and hyperdriving, and lightsabers and laser battles and such, I think people probably felt that Star Wars was leaning more on its special effects and didn't give the story the chance that it deserved. On the Halloween show, before Nicole had to go, we was trying to hold a conversation about horror, even horror that told stories, Twilight Zones, Outer Limits. Those a lot of times were Twilight Zone, my God, 99% of the time, if Twilight Zone was telling you a story, there was a moral at the end of it. But again, that was technically horror. It was sci-fi fantasy horror. Things on wings of planes and people with telekinetic powers. That was a couple, Buddy Epson and Bill Mumy. Speaking of just things in general, Bill Mumy did an episode. Oh my God, I just literally saw the name of it because he posted something on Facebook because Cloris Leachman played his mom. Oh my God. What the hell was the name of that episode? Something in The Good Place or something, where Bill Mooney played a kid that could make anything happen with his mind. They actually did a sequel to that in the updated Twilight Zone. He reprised the role. He and Cloris Leachman both reprised their roles. Hey, War Dog, what is up? Welcome. So I think this bullshit probably as a result of the B movies. And yep. I think you're probably right. The 50s. For anybody that is familiar with RiffTrax or Mystery Science Theater 3000, they have a channel, RiffTrax, which is Mike Nelson and I want to get these. Mike Nelson, Kevin, and Bill, who did the voices of Tom Servo and Crow, took the show on the road, and they basically go to theaters and they do it live. They riff on movies live, and there's a channel. My Samsung TV, my smart TV came with its own. Samsung has its own channels, and one of them is a RiffTrax channel, and I am addicted to the RiffTrax channel. And one of the things that they riffed on was an old Batman serial. And those things were absolutely hysterical. They were, they were funnier. They were just bad. Not like 1966 campy, we know we're being bad, but just bad. And it's the same thing like the old Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, all of those. They didn't take Superman. They didn't take themselves as seriously. And Robert, always glad to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, well, it was RiffTrax. Yeah, RiffTrax is basically the love child of MSTK because you got Mike and Bill and Kevin just basically, instead of doing it in front of the TV. I actually like it a little bit better because there's not all in the middle stuff. It's literally just them riffing on a movie. They don't have to pretend that they're trapped on a space station. But Pluto TV, which is a free app. My Fire TV has it. If you've got Fire TV, I don't know where else it's available, but I think it's available on my tab. It's on my tablet too. But Pluto TV also has RiffTrax, a RiffTrax channel, and an MSTK channel. But it's great if you just want to sit down and have a really good laugh. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. They're fabulous. They're hysterical. One of my favorite things that they riff on actually is those old, like speaking of the 50s and 60s, they riff on like those old tutorial kind of movies that they would show in school, like how to be a good teenager and how to avoid drugs and all this other stuff. But the other thing I will tell you is that they are all Star Wars and Star Trek fans, because that is part of my favorite thing is watching an episode of RiffTrax where they get very, very Star Trek or Star Wars, like deep dives into it. I'll use my favorite one, and I think I might have mentioned this on the show before, but I think my favorite one that they've done so far, there's this really bad movie called Oblivion. I think it's called Oblivion, and it's like the Old West in space. It's like a really bad version of Cowboys and Aliens. And but it's got, for some reason, they must have come up with a lot of money because they got Julie Newmar, they got Andrew Divoff, who played the Witchmaster, and they got George Takei to be in it. And Julie Newmar played Miss Kitty. It was just, it was very on the nose. But they also had a cyborg deputy, and the sheriff got killed, and she throws herself on top of the sheriff's body. And one of the riffers makes some comment about, well, she must be 3 of 4 or 2 of 8. And it's one of those ones where if you're not a Star Trek fan enough to know what a 7 of 9 is, you wouldn't have gotten the joke. The George Takei ones were actually because the movie was actually making him make Star Trek references. So the guys jumped on that. But again, if you are looking for, if you're just sitting around watching TV and you're looking for something to laugh at, definitely recommend checking out the RiffTrax channel. Samsung, Pluto, I don't know where else you can find it, but it's great. They actually revamped and rebooted MSTK on Netflix with Jonah Hill, who is a comedian that I do like, and he's also a geek. And you've got your server and your ground. It's the whole thing trapped on a space station. But they've revamped it, so there is some fresh MSTK out there for those MSTK fans. And of course, because it is my podcast, and because you guys, if you've watched me at all know that I love to digress and get off topic. But to our friends that are joining us, Robert and War Dog, I mean, what do you guys think? Star Wars versus Star Trek. Is it possible to love both fandoms and still be true to both fandoms? The general consensus in the room is absolutely, because it's totally a different kind of love. There really is no competition because they are really two completely different types of storytelling. Although, now that Disney's got the Star Trek franchise, or the Star Wars franchise, excuse me, now that Disney's got the Star Wars franchise, they are definitely moving more into the television. I mean, yeah, you had the cartoons, you had the Clone Wars, and they tried Ewok Adventures a while back. But yeah, you had cartoons, but now they're doing more live action stuff. I think there's at least 3 or 4 Star Wars themed. The Book of Boba Fett, cannot wait to watch. There's the Ahsoka one that they set up. I think there's at least 1 or 2 more. So Disney's being smart, because there's definitely a drought when there's no new Star Wars movies. There's nothing. You just rewatch the same stuff. So the fact that they're giving us new content and new stories is incredibly exciting, and it's something that I cannot wait for. Yeah, exactly. There is no other way to live life. You don't have to. Yeah, exactly. Mando's some of the best. The Baby Yoda show is absolutely some just incredible storytelling. Keeps you on the edge of your seat. Let's see, what does Travis have to say? Oh yeah, see, exactly. Excellent point, Travis. Gold star. For those of you that haven't seen them, just go Google it. Patrick Stewart and Mark Hamill have some amazing Uber Eats commercials, and they're just too funny to even talk about. But again, I mean, that's the it's just great because it's playing into that whole rivalry thing with the two of them. Hello, Magic Lasso. Nice of you to join us. One of these days, I have decided Magic Lasso has seen exactly 1 episode of Star Trek that he's admitted to. I don't know if he's seen any other ones. It was I think we decided, yeah, it was a TNG episode. But he is a Star Wars fan, and he has seen all the Star Wars movies, and he does watch Baby Yoda, and he needs to come on. I was going to try and get him on tonight. Unfortunately, scheduling didn't work. But one of these days, I think I want Magic Lasso to show his face on the show. Maybe we'll just talk about comic books in general. Star Trek's had comic books, and I think I did mention this before. In fact, the only mirror universe that you're going to get for Next Generation is in comic book form, and the artistry is amazing. I saw it when I was in Vegas, because everything that revolves around Star Trek pretty much I've seen in Vegas. But the artistry is absolutely amazing, and I need to sit down. If I was going to pick up a Star Trek comic, I'd probably do the TNG Mirror Universe comics after I get done reading the one that Magic Lasso sent me. And for any of you that don't know, Magic Lasso is also the name of his YouTube channel, so you need to go check him out. Any comic book geek worth his salt needs to go check it out. We actually talked a little bit to Sirach last week. Turns out Sirach is a Marvel guy. I am more DC, but I do enjoy Marvel as well. But if you want to know anything about comic books or WandaVision, Magic Lasso has also been talking about WandaVision, which I did actually watch. I am caught up on my WandaVision, and I love it. I think it's amazing and creepy and wonderful. And it took me, it took this last episode, took me a minute to kind of catch on to what was going on, but it's just fabulous. Fools of, what is that? Who is a furry? Pass it on. Lasso, I have no idea what that is. But anyway, yeah, so please go check out Magic Lasso. If you're into comic books or thinking about comic books, he is a great guide. And I always like to support my friends. Speaking of which, I am going to be appearing on my friend Nick's podcast, Music Isn't More Than a Genre, or is not a genre. Sorry, Nick, if you're watching, I don't think you are, but if you are, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of your podcast. But I will give you guys information on that because you get to watch the interviewer become the interviewee, because we're going to talk about music, because that is one of my other passions. For anybody that missed me posting my karaoke picture today on Facebook and Twitter from my first STLV, which happened to also be Enterprise's 30th, which I forgot about until I saw it on the back of the picture. Let's see, War Dog, what are we thinking? WandaVision's very cool. I tripped to the clues from the first episode, but I'm old and grew. No, I got that. I mean, the first episode was Dick Van Dyke. The second episode was Bewitched. The third episode was Brady Bunch. And if you couldn't figure out that the third episode was supposed to be Brady Bunch, they played Daydream Believer at the end of it. And for those of you that don't know, there's a Brady Bunch episode with Davy Jones. So, but then that fourth episode, man, that was the killer. But no spoilers here. So, after the release start with the latter movies seem to each be held in contempt by the fans. Star Trek, with the exception of Star Trek 5 and Discovery, seems to be more appreciated. We actually talked about that earlier, Domestic. But you can liken the 6 Star Trek episode, the 6 Star Wars. Don't ever see, this is the problem about having a podcast where you're talking about both. The 6 Star Wars movies outside of the original trilogy really do have bad juju with the fans. But so do the Kelvin Star Trek movies. So there are other things besides disco. I mean, Picard doesn't always get the love. I've seen people not liking Picard. I've definitely seen people not liking disco. The Kelvin, which I personally like. I know a lot of people don't like it. But it is still Star Trek, and I happen to like it. A lot of it has to do with the casting. I think the casting for Star Trek Kelvin was really spot on. And listen, you have to admit, I mean, Simon Pegg wrote the third one. I'm not sure if he had anything to do with the first 2 other than acting, but he did have a screen credit for this third one. And he's a fan. So, I mean, how can you diss on a Star Trek that's written by a fan? Plus the fact Star Trek Beyond has the most Enterprise references in it out of all of them. So of course it is my favorite. That and the scene at the end where they save the station is just epic. It's absolutely epic. So there's definitely Star Trek that people hate on, but you're right. And the thing about, the other thing about Star Wars too is that it's limited. I mean, it has 9 movies. And the holiday special that everybody hates. But now that they're branching off into TV, but before Disney and this whole thing, that was pretty much the only focus was 9 movies. And I think part of the problem too with Star Wars is that they had such a break between Return of the Jedi and Phantom Menace. And I don't think there was any way Phantom Menace was going to live up to expectations. I think just because it had been so long in the making, and I think there was just so many things wrong with it. I hate this poor little boy, but didn't like the kid as Anakin, and I did not like Hayden Christensen. I don't like his acting. I just think it was really bad. Let's see. I still want the 4th Kelvin timeline. They're still talking. Okay, that's fair. I am also waiting for the 4th Kelvin timeline if they would just somebody get off their ass. Let's see. The holiday special was hilarious, especially back in the day. The holiday special was an embarrassment. But 2020 hindsight. Oh, there's a riff in The Force Awakens that I've seen where they riff on the holiday special. But I mean, I have it. I actually own it on VHS. And I sat down and I watched it once, and it was pretty bad. But it was one of those things, like, if you're a Star Wars fan, you have to kind of watch it. I can find good because I feel like if you're a fan of anything, Star Wars or Star Trek, I feel like you can find something good in any of it. Even if you don't like it, you have to be able to sit down and and at least try to look for something good and not just write it off completely. I thought Obi-Wan, I love Ewan McGregor, so that helped. But I thought Obi-Wan was perfectly cast with Ewan McGregor. I thought he did an excellent job. Hated the metachlorines idea. A lot of people hated on that. Attack of the Clones. The overarching theme of the prequels was that Palpatine basically orchestrated a war to put himself in power. One man orchestrated a galactic conflict just so he could declare himself emperor. And I love that. I'm sorry. I've always been a fan of Palpatine, and his rise to power I enjoyed. So I found that's the redeeming quality for me. The conversation that he has with Anakin about the Sith, and about the Jedi being very black and white, where the Sith kind of live in the gray area, I thought was really interesting. So I like to be able to. I won't necessarily tell you that I love the prequels and the sequels, but I have been able to find things that I've enjoyed, and I will sit down and watch them. Let's see what we got going on. Kelvin Tyler movies are good. So is Disco and Picard. See, I agree with you, Travis. Absolutely 100%. But I've always felt, regardless of your fandom, I definitely feel like being part of a fandom means that you're allowed to have these conversations. Like I said, I mean, this is a safe space to have it because, like I said, we're not going to be hating. We're not going to use, nasty, had not, I don't want to be nasty about this. You're allowed to like both fandoms, but being a fan of everything or anything, you're allowed to not like all of it. I don't like Star Trek 5. A lot of people don't like Star Trek 5, as somebody mentioned earlier. There really isn't much. There's not anything really redeeming about Star Trek 5. Except that William Shatner likes to go around and joke about it. I do like that. But and the other thing I always like to think of when I think of Star Trek 5 is the fact that Star Trek used industrial lights and magic for all of their effects until Paramount said, nope, we're not paying that money. And 5, that was the other part of the problem, is 5 really suffered because of the special effects. Bad special effects at that point in movie making, there's just no excuse for a Star Trek movie to have bad special effects and not having ILM, which I always thought was funny. It's like, you didn't have the Star Wars people doing your special effects, so your movie looked like shit. It's basically how I always looked at that. But they won everything back. Star Trek 6 was amazing. And if you ask me, except First Contact is my favorite Star Trek movie. As we all know, basically because I can call it an Enterprise prequel. But overall, I think the movies with the original cast, I like the movies with the original cast better than the TNG cast. But out of all of those, I like First Contact the best. Nemesis is sad. Nemesis and Insurrection are kind of tied. Generations, But like I said, I think being a fan of anything, you should be able to have an opinion, as long as even a negative opinion can be said delicately, can be said nicely. I mentioned this I think it was last week or the week before, when one of the times that Lasso and I were together face to face, we had an entire discussion about why Superman 4, which is a movie I absolutely hate, even Christopher Reeve didn't like it and he co-wrote it, is still better than Bryan Singer's Superman Returns. And I sat down and said, this is why. So we just had a complete discussion about movies that I don't like and which one was a little bit better than the other one that I completely despise. But I'm still a Superman fan. Superman in all its forms. Enterprise ended way too soon. Absolutely. Everybody thinks that. It's interesting to see the petitions going around We need an Enterprise movie. We need an Enterprise cartoon. I think that's all great. But I think it just gets to a point where the characters have all moved, or the actors. Well, the characters have obviously moved on. They've moved on to the novels. But the actors have all moved on. And I'm not sure that they'd want to get behind a mic and go back there. If you have the Blu-rays of Enterprise, and I haven't gotten to this extra yet, but there's a point where they're talking to the cast after the show got canceled, and there's just such bad blood there, and it all left such a bad taste in their mouths. I'm not sure that they would come back even if they were asked, which is completely understandable. We did get to see Nichelle Nichols dance and sing. Don't forget, she did sing. So yeah, that was definitely interesting. That was definitely a very interesting part of Star Trek V. She still got it. She still had it going on. But then her flirting with Scotty, that was just weird. Sorry, that was that was just weird. Oh, look who's back. Hi, Sugar. Yeah, you can't put like an on-air light that a cat's going to understand. So if you guys are hearing this, you're hearing Sugar, who thinks that just because I'm sitting in a chair that I'm not doing anything and I should be paying attention to her. Yes, I know. No, not good enough. If you want to come up and say hi to the people, you can come up, but I know you don't like me when I pick you up, so figure it out. Oh yeah, and by the way, if you guys haven't noticed, my green screen, I finally think, knock on wood, that I solved the green screen issue. This is the best that it's looked. And considering the fact that it's 10:46, I'm going to be wrapping stuff up soon, so even if it falls over, I think this is the longest that I've had my green screen last, that it's looked this good. Yay! So next week's show, I actually, believe it or not, I already know what I'm going to be talking about next week. I'm going to be talking about our favorite castings of characters, because I realized that there have been a lot of recasts of certain characters, and I think we can talk about. Yeah, see, again, that was just ridiculous. I think Travis says hi, Sugar. I think with this, I think there was humor. I think they were trying to recapture the humor of Star Trek 4, and it just felt forced and awful. And again, my favorite word, not very organic. So that whole movie just seemed really forced. Although that one line, "What does God need with a starship?" was pretty good. I mean, Rocky V was terrible too, but there were some good lines in it. So I will give "What does God need with a starship" a thumbs up on that one. But yeah, I think next week, so be thinking about the roles that have been played by more than one actor. Spock's mom comes to mind. She's been played by a lot of different people. Saavik has been played by a couple of different people. And I actually had a chance to interview Robin Curtis a couple years ago in Ticonderoga about stepping into Kirstie Alley's shoes. So that's what we're going to be talking about, roles and recasting of roles and how that makes everybody feel. So that's next week's show. I am still looking for a February guest. I can't make any promises. It's really tough right now to nail people down, but it's entirely possible I will have a guest this February. So please, everybody, remember, I would love if you could patronize me on Patreon. That's where you can go to patronize me on Patreon. Domestic, thank you for being the first for breaking the ice. The other thing about my Patreon is all the tiers are named after Enterprise episodes. So I was having a lot of fun trying to figure out what to call my tiers, and I just kind of, they're all season 1, because season 1 just seemed to fit absolutely everything that I wanted to say. So patronize me on Patreon if you can. Thank you all so much, as always, for joining me. Oh, Lasso, Kitty Ears is a good cast. Yes, and when Kitty Cat Ears decides that he's going to actually, when his acting career takes him onto and makes him a Star Trek alumni, then he'll have, but I'm talking about trying to find a Star Trek alum for February. But Kitty Cat Ears is always welcome. So he will definitely be back. Fear not. Guys, as always, thank you so much for joining me. Always love hanging out with you. Love talking to you. Love all the feedback. And until next week, please be careful, stay safe, and live long and prosper.
Hey, this is Connor Turner. You've been listening to the NX7062 podcast with Stephanie. Enjoy your evening.